They told her to wait. They told her the doctor was on the way. But in a cold hospital hallway, with blood on the floor and pain tearing her body apart, she realized the truth too late. The only doctor on call was the man who broke her heart. Her ex-husband, and she was about to give birth to his twins. Before this story shatters you, hit subscribe, because stories like this don't just entertain. They stay with you. The pain came in waves she could no longer breathe through, sharp and unforgiving, crashing into her body like punishment for every mistake she had ever made, and as Amelia Carter clutched the cold metal railing of the hospital stretcher, sweat dripping into her eyes, she knew with terrifying certainty that she was out of time, because the orderly pushing her suddenly stopped, the wheels screeching against the polished floor, and muttered something about no rooms being available, about emergencies stacking up, about doctors already overwhelmed, and in that moment the hallway became her delivery room, bright fluorescent lights blinding her as another contraction ripped through her abdomen and she screamed, a sound so raw it echoed off the white walls, while nurses rushed past with charts and stretchers and no one seemed to notice that she was about to give birth to twins right there between the vending machines and the fire exit. She hadn't planned for this hospital. She hadn't planned for tonight. She hadn't planned for anything to go wrong because Amelia Carter had spent the last 7 months controlling every detail of her life the way she always did, alone, quietly, without asking anyone for help. But fate had never cared about her plans, not the night her marriage collapsed, not the day she found out she was pregnant, and certainly not now, as her body betrayed her in public, exposed and shaking, while a nurse knelt between her legs and said the words that froze her blood. "You're fully dilated." Amelia's head snapped back against the stretcher. "No," she gasped. "I can't, there has to be a doctor." The nurse hesitated, eyes darting down the hallway. "There is one on call." Another contraction slammed into her and she cried out, fingers clawing at the thin hospital sheet. "Then get him." The nurse swallowed. He's coming from surgery. He'll be here any second." Amelia barely heard the rest because a memory surfaced without mercy, broad shoulders, calm hands, a voice that used to whisper her name like a promise, and she shook her head violently, because the last thing she needed right now was the past forcing its way back into her life at the exact moment she was most vulnerable. She tried to focus on breathing, on the rhythmic instructions echoing faintly in her mind from prenatal classes she attended alone, sitting in the back, avoiding eye contact, avoiding questions about the father, but the pain overwhelmed everything, and when she felt the pressure shift, when her body bore down without permission, panic flooded her chest. "I'm pushing," she sobbed. The nurse cursed under her breath and shouted down the hallway, "Dr. Reynolds. We need you now." Amelia's heart stopped. That name. She hadn't heard it spoken out loud in years, not since the divorce papers slid across the table, not since he looked at her like he didn't recognize the woman he'd married, and now the echo of his surname bounced off sterile walls as if the hospital itself were conspiring to bring him back into her life. "No," Amelia whispered. "Please. Anyone else." But fate didn't answer please, it delivered consequences. Footsteps approached, urgent, measured, unmistakably familiar, and when Amelia turned her head, fighting through pain and fear, she saw him at the end of the hallway, pulling off surgical gloves, dark hair damp with sweat, white coat streaked faintly with blood, eyes focused and sharp until they met hers. And in that instant, everything shattered. Dr. Ethan Reynolds stopped walking. For a heartbeat, the world went silent, the beeping monitors, the distant cries, the rush of staff, because the woman on the stretcher wasn't just another patient. She was her, the woman who left without explanation. The woman who broke him. The woman who never told him the truth. "Amelia," he breathed, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I didn't know it was you," she said hoarsely, though that was only half the truth. Another contraction hit before he could respond, and she screamed, body arching as the nurse yelled instructions, and Ethan snapped into motion because no matter what she had done, no matter how much it hurt to see her like this, he was still a doctor, and right now she needed one. "Okay," he said firmly, stepping beside her, voice steady even as his heart raced. "Listen to me. I've got you." She shook her head, gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. "I can't do this with you." "You don't have a choice," he replied gently. "And neither do I." Then the nurse looked up at him, eyes wide. "Doctor, there's another heartbeat." Ethan's hands stilled. Another heartbeat. Slowly, his gaze lifted to Amelia's face, confusion giving way to realization, and something dangerous sparked in his eyes. "Twins?" he asked quietly. She closed her eyes. Yes. The hallway felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were closing in, and as Ethan prepared to deliver the first child, a truth hovered between them, heavy and unspoken, because these weren't just any babies. They were his. And in a hallway soaked in fluorescent light and unfinished history, the past was about to be reborn screaming. The second baby didn't wait politely for explanations, confessions, or the emotional wreckage spreading silently between Amelia Carter and Dr. Ethan Reynolds. It announced itself with a violent surge that stole her breath completely, her body convulsing as if it had made its own decision without consulting her, and Ethan felt it immediately beneath his steady hands, the unmistakable urgency that made his professional instincts snap sharp even as his personal world tilted off its axis, because this wasn't just another delivery anymore, this was his past bleeding into the present, and the stakes were no longer theoretical, they were screaming and very, very real. Okay, Ethan said, his voice calm but edged with command as nurses rushed back, forming a makeshift wall of urgency around the hallway. Amelia, I need you to listen to me. Baby one is crowning. You're doing great. Focus on my voice. She laughed once, broken and breathless. You always said that, she gasped. Even when I wasn't. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Now is not the time. Blood spotted the sheets, the metallic smell sharp in the air, and Amelia clutched the sides of the stretcher as pain tore through her again, her scream echoing loud enough to turn heads at the far end of the corridor. Somewhere, a baby cried, another life, another miracle, but here, everything felt suspended on a knife's edge. Push, Ethan instructed. She did. With a final, primal sound, the first twin came into the world in the middle of a hospital hallway, surrounded by strangers and one man who stared in stunned silence as he lifted the tiny, slippery body into his hands. A girl, the nurse said quickly, checking vitals. She's breathing. A sharp cry cut through the chaos, strong and furious, and Amelia sobbed openly now, tears streaking sideways into her hair as relief and exhaustion collided in her chest. She's okay, Ethan nodded, unable to stop himself from staring at the baby's face, at the familiar shape of her nose, the dark swirl of hair already damp against her scalp, and something inside him cracked wide open. She looks like. Another contraction slammed into Amelia before the thought could finish. Wait, she cried. Something's wrong. Ethan's focus snapped back instantly. I know. Baby 2 is coming fast. The nurse's expression changed. Doctor, heart rate's dropping. The hallway seemed to tilt. How long between deliveries? Ethan asked. Too long, the nurse answered. Amelia's eyes widened in terror. What does that mean? Ethan leaned closer, lowering his voice, anchoring her. It means we're going to move quickly. I need you with me, Amelia. Don't panic. She laughed again, hysterical this time. Easy for you to say. Another push. Nothing. Ethan frowned, checking positioning, then cursed softly under his breath. The second baby's transverse. What? Amelia cried. It means he's sideways, Ethan said, already working, his movements precise but urgent. I need to reposition him. Her scream was instant and animal, her fingers digging into his forearm so hard he felt nails break skin, but he didn't stop, because he couldn't, because if he did, there would be no second chances. I'm sorry, he murmured. I know it hurts. You left, she sobbed. You don't get to be sorry now. The words hit harder than her grip. I didn't leave, he shot back before he could stop himself. You disappeared. You filed for divorce without even telling me why. She stared at him through tears and sweat. Because I thought you'd hate me. Hate you for what? He demanded. Another alarm beeped sharply. Doctor, the nurse warned. We're losing him. Ethan swallowed, hands steady even as his heart raced. Amelia, he said, softer now. Whatever you're holding back, it doesn't matter right now. I need you to trust me. Her chest hitched, and in that moment, between pain and fear, between life and death, something inside her finally broke. I found the messages, she whispered. Ethan froze for half a second too long. What messages? On your phone, she said, voice shaking. From a woman at the hospital. Late night texts, jokes, plans. Realization crashed over him like ice water. Laura, he said, stunned. She was a resident. I was mentoring her. You deleted them, Amelia sobbed. You lied when I asked. I deleted them because they crossed a professional line, he said fiercely. Nothing happened. You never told me that, she cried. I was pregnant and terrified and convinced I was ruining your life. His breath caught. Pregnant. The word hung there, years too late. Another contraction tore through her, ripping away the past. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters, he said hoarsely. It always mattered. He repositioned the baby with a final, desperate maneuver, sweat dripping from his brow. Now, he said, push, as hard as you can. Amelia screamed his name, not as accusation, not as memory, but as need, and bore down with everything she had left. Time fractured. Then a cry, Thin, weak, but unmistakably alive. It's a boy, the nurse said, relief flooding her voice. He's breathing, barely. Ethan didn't hesitate. He worked fast, clearing airways, stimulating the tiny body until finally, blessedly, the second baby cried louder, stronger, filling the hallway with sound that made Amelia collapse back against the stretcher, sobbing uncontrollably. They're alive, she whispered. Yes, Ethan said, his own voice breaking now. Both of them. For a moment, no one spoke. The hallway, moments ago a battlefield, felt suddenly sacred. Then Amelia turned her head slowly and looked at him, really looked at him, her eyes red and raw. They're yours. He already knew, but hearing it felt like the floor giving way beneath him. You were going to raise them alone, he said quietly. She nodded. I thought it was kinder. His laugh was short and pained. You thought stealing my children was kindness. Her face crumpled. I thought loving you meant letting you go. The babies cried again, their voices overlapping, inseparable, and Ethan realized with a shock that his entire life had just split into a before and an after. Footsteps approached as a gurney arrived at last, rooms finally freed, the crisis technically over, but emotionally, everything was just beginning. As they wheeled Amelia away, Ethan walked beside her, his hand hovering near hers, unsure if he was allowed to touch, unsure of anything at all except this. The hallway hadn't just delivered twins. It had delivered the truth. The first night passed without sleep, not for Amelia Carter, whose body ached in places she didn't know existed and whose heart felt split clean down the middle, and not for Ethan Reynolds, who sat rigid in a plastic chair beside the NICU glass, staring at two tiny bodies fighting for breath under soft blue lights, because no matter how many lives he had helped bring into the world, nothing had prepared him for the terror of watching his own children struggle to stay in it. The boy, Noah, Amelia had whispered the name through tears, was the weaker of the two, his chest fluttering in shallow, uneven rhythms that made alarms chirp too often, too loudly, and every sound sent a fresh spike of fear through Ethan's veins, while the girl, Lily, lay fiercer and louder, her tiny fists clenched as if already angry at the world that dared to hurt her brother. Amelia watched them from her hospital bed, IV lines taped to her arm, her hair still matted with sweat and blood, and for the first time since the hallway she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had done, what she had nearly stolen from Ethan, what she had almost lost forever. You can go, she said quietly when she noticed him still standing there hours later, his coat draped over the back of the chair, eyes rimmed red. You don't owe me anything. Ethan didn't look at her. I owe them everything. The words settled between them, heavy but honest. By morning, the hospital knew. Nurses whispered. Doctors avoided eye contact. The story spread the way hospital stories always did, fast, distorted, irresistible, and by noon, administration was involved, legal teams quietly circling, because hospitals did not like headlines, and this one had lawsuit written all over it, twins delivered in a hallway by an on-call doctor who just happened to be the mother's ex-husband. When the social worker arrived, clipboard tucked to her chest, Amelia's stomach dropped. This is just routine, the woman said gently, though her eyes were sharp. We need to establish parental information. Ethan stood instantly. I'm the father. The social worker paused, pen hovering. Were you aware of the pregnancy prior to delivery? No, he answered honestly. The woman nodded slowly, making a note, and Amelia felt shame burn through her so hot she had to look away. That afternoon, Noah crashed. It happened quickly, the way the worst things always did. One moment his oxygen levels were low but manageable, the next alarms screamed and nurses flooded the NICU, voices overlapping, hands moving fast, and Amelia tried to get out of bed, panic lending her strength she didn't have, while Ethan was already moving, already scrubbing in, his mind cold and precise even as fear threatened to tear him apart. He needs surgery, a neonatologist said. Internal bleeding. We don't know if. I know, Ethan cut in. I'll assist. You can't, the doctor said firmly. Conflict of interest. Ethan's hands clenched. He'll die if we wait. The room went still. Amelia's voice broke the silence. Let him. Everyone turned to her. He's their father, she said, tears streaming freely now. And he's the best doctor I know. The neonatologist hesitated, then nodded once. Fine, but this ends your career if something goes wrong. Ethan didn't hesitate. If I save my son, I don't care. The hours that followed stretched into something unrecognizable, time dissolving into prayer and fear and memories Amelia couldn't stop replaying. The night she packed her bags, the pregnancy test shaking in her hand, the moment she decided she was strong enough to do this alone, and now here she was, weaker than she'd ever been, realizing strength was never meant to be solitary. When Ethan finally emerged from surgery, his scrub stained, his face hollow. With exhaustion, Amelia knew before he spoke. He's stable, he said hoarsely. Her knees buckled and she would have fallen if Ethan hadn't caught her, his arms around her for the first time in years, solid and real and warm, and she cried into his chest without apology because some pain demanded witnesses. The consequences came swiftly: an internal review, mandatory leave, threats of license suspension. Ethan accepted it all without complaint. What about custody? Amelia asked one night, voice barely above a whisper, as they stood together by the incubators, Lily sleeping peacefully now, Noah breathing stronger than before. Ethan didn't look at her. I'll fight for them. Her heart sank. Against me. He finally turned. With you. If you'll let me. She searched his face for bitterness, for anger, for the resentment she deserved, but all she saw was love worn thin by time and regret. I was scared, she said. I thought I was protecting you. I needed the truth, he replied softly. Not protection. Silence settled, comfortable and fragile. Weeks passed. The twins grew stronger. Paperwork was filed. Headlines were quietly buried. And one evening, as Amelia packed to leave the hospital with 2 babies and no clear plan, Ethan stood in the doorway, holding car seat instructions upside down. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. She smiled through tears. Neither do I. He hesitated, then said the words that mattered most. Let's learn together. Outside, the world waited, messy, uncertain, unforgiving, but as Amelia placed Lily and Noah into their seats, as Ethan closed the car door with shaking hands, she realized something profound. The hallway had taken everything from them. But it had also given everything back. Because sometimes love doesn't return gently. Sometimes it crashes into your life screaming, demanding to be born, and daring you to be brave enough to stay.